Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Kyle Merritt, and I'm here to talk to you today about Ernest Hemingway and the iceberg theory. Now, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Endless possibilities for just a 6-word sentence. This is the type of writing that Ernest Hemingway is famous for. Very minimal, but heavy on the detail that can't be seen by the words on the page. Hemingway lived a very interesting life, and his life ended up becoming a major factor in the writing style that he has created, known as the iceberg theory. Now, Ernest Hemingway was born in Oak Park, Illinois back in 1899, and his first job was for a local newspaper. It was there that Ernest Hemingway began to write for his entire career. And with that came the First World War. Hemingway enlisted in the Italian army as an ambulance driver, and during this time he was wounded multiple times and met many women, for which Hemingway is very famous for. After the First World War, Hemingway was very lost. He did not know what to do. He became a part of the Lost Generation, which was a group of writers who really didn't know what to do with themselves after the First World War because they'd seen so many horrendous atrocities that affected their mental capacity for the rest of their lives. And during this time, Hemingway began to travel, began to meet very many people throughout his life, and he started in Paris, and then he ended up going to Spain and Cuba, Florida, all over the place. And with that, he became a Spanish Civil War correspondent for another newspaper, for which he made another career for himself. And after that, he became very much a big game hunter. He traveled to Africa, hunted lions, and hunted big game such as marlins down in the Florida Gulf Coast. And throughout his entire life, he was a heavy drinker, and drinking really affected his life, but as many would say, that no one could take a drink like Ernest Hemingway. And with this alcoholism and all the writing that he did in his life, he gained very many mental disabilities, and these disabilities ended up becoming so fierce that he ended up taking his own life by putting his favorite shotgun in his mouth in Ketchum, Idaho. Now, Hemingway's life was the inspiration for many of his works, if not all of his works. In The Sun Also Rises, that was his time spent in Paris right after the First World War, and during in A Farewell to Arms, that was his account of the First World War as an ambulance driver. And For Whom the Bell Tolls, he recounted his life as during the Spanish Civil War. And with all these different novels that he was writing, he also wrote very many short stories that also detailed many different aspects of his life and his feelings and everything. But in the early 1950s, he wrote the ultimate memoir of his entire life, which was The Old Man and the Sea, for which he won the ultimate prize for any writer, which would be the Nobel Prize for Literature and the Pulitzer Prize. And with that, he really established his dominance as one of America's greatest writers of the early 20th century. Now, the one thing besides Hemingway's life that all his works had in common was his writing style. Now, his writing style was very short, very minimal, as one could see through the 6-word story that we encountered at the very beginning. Much like an iceberg, Hemingway let his language be the very tip of what everyone saw on the page. And with that, he would just leave it at that. Underneath the surface, however, lies all the emotions and the subconscious of the characters that he wouldn't normally let the reader know just by describing it. He let the reader pick apart his tiny details and make an assumption for themselves as to what was going on. Now, with that, one could see that Hemingway really used only short sentences and and quite a bit of dialogue. In a Princeton study, one dissected all of Hemingway's punctuation in A Farewell to Arms, and most of it was periods and quotation marks. Hardly any commas, or hardly any semicolons, excuse me, and just a few colons here and there. Very short, very declarative. And with this very short writing style came the 6-word short stories, which inspired many writers to make many short stories just by one sentence. One could see that the baby shoe story could be interpreted in many ways. Perhaps the baby died, perhaps the mother just gave the shoes away. Who knows? That's the point of the iceberg theory in Hemingway. Now, one could see that Hemingway had quite the life, very adventurous, not the classiest of lives, but it was one that was worth telling a story about. And these stories ended up becoming some of the most important novels in American literature. A Farewell to Arms is perhaps the most influential World War I novel today. And with Hemingway's writing comes the new writing style. In the past, many writers used long, flowing sentences with hundreds of descriptions that just never seemed to end. But Hemingway used short sentences that drove the point home and let the reader think for themselves. And with this new writing style comes new inspirations for new authors every single day. And with that, that is Ernest Hemingway and the iceberg theory.